and then so it looks like that is going. So from a safety perspective, I know this is a virtual meeting, but I still want to have you all just take a quick moment, look around you, make sure you're aware of any kids, any pets, any trip hazards that might be where you are. Know your emergency phone numbers should an emergency arise. And if you need to evacuate where you're currently dialing in from, just know what those exits are, as well as any take cover locations should we run into inclement weather. Now, I'm excited today because we are here to talk about interactive impact, elevating engagement in your training. Now, a little bit about myself real quick, in case those of you who don't know me are wondering who on earth is this random person and why is she talking to me today? Well, my name is Heather Blase, and I've been a member of Toastmasters since 2014, so a little over about 10 and a half years, just about. I've served in a number of different roles, everything from a club officer in multiple roles, all the way up to our past program quality director for the district, which is currently being filled by Wendy on this call. A little bit about me. I've got 3 wonderful girls. I'm married to a very unique and loving man named John. And some things that I like to do for fun include being part of a murder mystery group. I also enjoy singing and theater, and my personal motto is really to inspire others to achieve greatness or to shine brightly. And my hope with this is that you will feel a little more bright by the end of this session and that you can truly let your colors fly. I currently, from a professional standpoint, work at Caterpillar, and my role there is a senior learning and development consultant. So I am responsible for all of North America and ensuring that our sales personnel at the different dealerships across the northern part of our continent understand what they need to do to make those sales. So that's a little bit about me, and we're going to jump in, but I want to know a little bit about all of you. So we're going to have a poll. I want this to be interactive. I want this to be engaging. How confident are you when it comes to engaging your audience? Now give it just a moment. There should be a poll that pops up for you. You can also put your response in the chat. But how are you feeling when we talk about engagement for your audience? Are you just absolutely amazing? Do you know a thing or two? What we have to be engaging? Oh my gosh, hopefully we're not there, but we'll help you through it. Or are you just so overwhelmed you have no idea where to start? Let's give it a minute and see where we're at, and then we'll keep going. So Dick, I will have you as my facilitator person here. Let me know when we've got all of our responses in.
I see 12 responses so far, 13, sorry. That's probably, I haven't counted how many people are on. But it's probably about.
Let's see what our responses are. How are we doing today? When we talk about engagement, where are we at? Let's show those results. Ooh, all right. So a good mix of you are knowing, I know a thing or two. Awesome. I want to hear about that, and I want to hear from you during this session. Thank you for being part of that little poll and letting me know where we all stand. Now, for those that are thinking, wait, I have to be engaging, don't worry. We'll help you out. We'll give you some things, which leads us to why we are here. What are we wanting to do today? Well, can I have a volunteer read our purpose? I'm going to call on somebody. I would like to have, let's see, Carl, do you mind coming off mute and reading out loud what our purpose is today?
This training is to designate to provide Toastmaster Leadership Institute TLI facilitators with actual tips, tools, and techniques for better audience engagement to improve the classroom experience for the TLI attendees.
Awesome. Thank you very much. If you have your reactions, you can show Carl a little love and a little appreciation. Thank you for being called upon and for being part of that. Having participants do something like reading out loud or participating in a poll, those are some engagement techniques that we can all use as part of your training when you're looking at doing your next Toastmasters Leadership Institute or TLI. So this is what we're going to do today, but why do we care about this? You might be thinking, this is great, but I didn't necessarily build the content. I'm just facilitating it. Why do I need to be engaging? Well, it's important to understand that when you engage participants in the learning process, you're going to increase their attention and their focus. You're going to help move them to more critical thinking because they'll be actively involved in your learning. And you're going to ultimately improve that learning experience. Instead of just sitting and getting and just waiting for things to come to them, they'll be actively involved. This is why we want to be thinking about audience engagement and why it's important. So my hope for you by the end of this session tonight is that you'll be able to do at least two things. The first one is to determine at least one audience engagement technique that you will use when you present at TLI in the coming weeks. I also want you to be able to explain or to understand when you might use that technique. If you need to think of it simply, I'd like you to think of this. We're here tonight to help you understand how you can move your learner from blah to hurrah when it comes to engagement. Hopefully that's something that's pretty easy to remember. Blah to hurrah, one thing to bring home, and we'll talk more about what we can do as we move forward. Now, if you have questions, I do want to encourage you, please put anything in the chat. I'll keep an eye on that, and Dick can help keep me honest. And if you'd like to ask your question out loud, don't hesitate to come off of mute and just let it be known. I'm here to help answer questions as much as I am to share with you and hear from you. So I want you to be engaged as part of this session as well. Now, I want to talk about a few concepts that I think it's important for us to understand as facilitators. Now, a number of you already said in that first poll, you know a thing or two, and that's fantastic. But let's make sure we're all kind of level setting and we know what we can be expecting here. From outcomes, from learning outcomes, we want to make sure that those are being stated upfront and very clear. In Stephen Covey's book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, his habit number 2 talks about beginning with the end in mind. What is it that we want our participants to do or to do differently? Why do they need to be here? Essentially, we want to make sure that you're able to tell them why they are investing time and energy in your training. Pop quiz. Who is paying attention? You can put this in the chat. You can unmute yourselves. Who can tell me what are the learning outcomes that are intended for this session? Anybody, anybody?
To go from blah to hurrah.
Thank you, Mary Lynn. That is something we want to definitely look at doing. So our intended learning outcomes to move from that blah to hurrah are having you be able to identify at least one audience engagement technique and to be able to explain when you might use that during your own sessions. Now, how do you know what the learning outcomes are? How did you know what mine were?
You explained it up front.
Okay, I explained it up front. Thank you. So that kind of tells us when it was also communicated to you as learners. We talked about it right at the very beginning. Do you understand why the learning outcomes for this particular session are important?
It's a way to give the learner a roadmap and to kind of know where we're going, how we're getting there, that kind of thing.
Thank you, Chris. Excellent point. Yes, it's to really help understand the perspective from the learner and so that we can help move them to understanding why it's relevant. Do you think these learning outcomes should come up again throughout the session?
Yes, it is important to reiterate what they're trying to do as you go through this, and to keep the roadmap too. You want to have sort of a visual roadmap as you go through the whole thing.
Thank you very much, Christian. Yes. So these are things that I'm hoping will be instilled in you by the time we are done with our session. So keeping that clear up front so our learners know what they're doing, why they're here, and why we want them to be engaged with us. Now, as adults, we actually are unique in how we learn. Adults, we prefer to have a more proactive approach in our learning experiences. So the more involved that we feel in that learning process, then typically the more likely we are to remember and to use the new skills that we've learned. Now, a few ways that I've already involved you in this training include things like using the poll at the beginning. That's an audience engagement technique. I had the volunteer who read what our purpose was. That's another audience engagement technique, getting them to do something. They're very simple ways without having to expend a lot of thought, energy, or effort that you can start to engage your audience, whether they're going to be virtual like we're meeting today or in person like a number of you will be presenting in a couple of weeks. For adult learners, there's a few things that we want to make sure are right up front. As adults, we want to really understand the purpose. That's why I keep asking, what are we here for? What are we trying to do? Move our learner from blah to hurrah by being able to understand one technique, when and how I can use that. As adults, we want to make our own decisions. So I'm not going to be the one this entire session telling you what to do. I'm going to ask for feedback from you because you already told me that you have a few things in your tool belt or in your back pocket that you know about for this. So let's share it for those who maybe were not really sure that they needed to be engaging, and let's help talk them off the cliff a little bit. Making your own decisions are something that we want to also involve from an adult learning perspective. And sharing experiences. And this is something that will be very important as you get into your sessions, because that's where a lot of our members and our new club officers are going to find a lot of benefit, is from those shared experiences. You're going to have a mix of new officers, never been in the role before, to very seasoned officers who've been in that role, plus others throughout their Toastmasters career. So getting people to share those experiences really helps bring them together and really aids in learning from an adult perspective. And then how are they going to apply that to a real life situation? That's one of the best ways for us to start being able to apply the knowledge, is understanding not only kind of what is it that I'm doing and why is this important, but then how can I use this and put it to work to help me or to help others? And then finally, motivation. Motivation is something we should all have some sense of. And there's external factors such as, I don't know, maybe you're going to get a raise at work because you've been so fabulous at being a facilitator. Awesome. But what about an internal motivation? Not everybody is motivated by money, and that's okay. Internal motivations can be things like just wanting to grow as an individual, or it could be something where you just feel like you have more self-esteem and your confidence has been built. For that person or people who are not really sure about having to be engaging, that could be a motivator for you, being able to build a little bit of that confidence. We do all want to feel good about ourselves, don't we? Now, when we talk about adults, there are really 3 learning styles, and this isn't just for adults, but keeping it front of mind for you. Our 3 primary learning styles include visual, auditory, and kinesthetic. It's a bit of a mouthful, but when we look at all of these, the best way to engage your learners, your members, is by using a combination of all 3 of those learning styles. By doing that, you're going to be able to allow your participants to not only see it, but to hear it, and then to be able to do something with it, touching it, feeling it, making them be active about it. Now, I have a take note here on this slide, because if nothing else, I think you should write this down. The best technique to use is a combination of all 3 of these styles. Plus, when you write things down, it improves your retention. So when you're in your sessions, if possible, try to get your members, your audience engagement people, try to get them to write something down. Maybe it's up on a flip chart. Maybe it's on a whiteboard. Maybe it's on a piece of paper that they have in their own notes. Get them to write it down. That's involving the kinesthetic piece of it while you're telling them what to do and they're seeing what you're sharing on that screen. Now, one of the things we can do also from an engagement perspective is a simple game. So we're going to play a little bit of one, and I hope you'll play along with me. Now you can feel free to put things in the chat. You can call things out loud. I'm open for both, but I want to do a little bit of matching here. So we talked about 3 learning styles: visual, auditory, and kinesthetic. And there's a word bank on the right-hand side of your screen with some percentages. Now, I can kind of see some of you on my other screen here, but I'd like you to unmute yourselves and just start to call out here. How many feel that the percentage of retention when you use the visual style is 30%? You can use your raise hand, you can give me a reaction, pop it in the chat. Anybody feeling 30%? I think I saw a flash of at least one person. Got a thumbs up, all right. So for visual learning, it's a little higher than 30%. We're looking at about a 60% rate of retention, which is pretty darn good, if you ask me. Now, what about auditory? Do you feel that auditory would be 30%, 60%, 90%? Put some of those in the chat. Gary, I see you've put 30. 30, I'm hearing 30. I see 30 in the chat from Chris, from Carl.
Yeah, 30.
I'm hearing John, thanks, 30. Oh, looks like lucky winner is 30%. Chicken dinner, winner, chicken dinner. 30% is really what you get from just auditory alone. So already you're doubling that when you can use auditory visual. Use those together. Now, you're probably smart enough, and I'm not going to belabor this point, but that means 90% of retention for learning is through that kinesthetic piece, really involving and using that combination. Now, a matching game like this is another thing that you could very easily use in your sessions. We've done it here virtually. This is something you could do as a handout in your class, or you could have people come and move things around on a whiteboard using Post-it notes and answers, have them match or do things. This is a technique that you can definitely use, and it can be put to work in either virtual or in an in-person setting. So I've talked a little bit about some concepts and things to just understand and be aware of. And hopefully it's not too much of a repetition for those of you that know a thing or two, but hopefully you're pulling in some ways to think about how to use those concepts. Now I want to change gears a little bit and give you some tips, because as part of our learning outcomes, I want you to be able to go home leaving with at least one engagement technique and understanding or explaining how and when you could use that. So when we talk about facilitation, I mentioned that you're facilitators and you're not presenters. So can I get a show of hands, or you can turn on your camera if you'd like. How many of you have been in a situation like what is shown in this picture? It's a boring lecture. The windows are open. I'm falling asleep. There's not enough caffeine. When can I be done? How many of you have experienced that? I'm seeing some hands. I'm seeing some thumbs up. Appreciate that. Well, that's definitely what we want to avoid. And that's what I'm hoping to avoid with this as well. As facilitators, and more importantly, as world-class facilitators, you want to bring your learners together around the intended outcome. Why are we here? What are we doing? What do I want you to leave home with? As facilitators, you want to think about your focus to help lead our learners without getting too deep into the content. Most of the modules that you'll be covering, they've already been built, so we don't need you to dive too deep. But when we talked about encouraging people to share, and as adult learners, how we want to be able to share stories and learn from each other, what this really means is there should be, as a facilitator, a little less of you and a little bit more of them. So you've been engaging with me in the chat, you've been turning your cameras on, you've been giving me reactions, you've participated in things. That's something I greatly appreciate, and your learners should appreciate that too when you get to your sessions. So make sure that you're engaging in helping them bring a little more of them out. Let them talk. Let some of your experienced club officers share stories or challenges that they've had. to those less experienced or new in the officer role. Help that conversation and that dialogue go along. They don't have to hear all about it from you. They can see what's on a slide. They can hear what you're telling them, but then let them tell each other and share a little bit more of that. The clear structure is there in your content. It's built. You have those learning outcomes as part of what you will be sharing, but help make your learners feel empowered so that they can apply that and they can use that to problem solve together. Now, I want to give another tip and another thing that you can try. I don't know, just Google it. How many times have you heard that phrase? I want you to actually stop looking at me, stop paying attention, and I want you to either use your phone or pull up a web browser, and I want you to search in-person training activities for adults. Or if you'd rather, you can search virtual training activities for adults. So I want you to take a minute, do that. And as you start to see some of those responses pull up, put them in the chat or unmute yourselves. Tell me what's coming up for you when you put in that search in Google. And I know it'll take a moment sometimes, depending on speed. Karen, I'm going to call on you. What's coming up when you do that search?
I'm just getting to that. So I have 18, you said in-person training activities, yes?
Yeah,
Okay.
sure.
Okay, so right off, I have 18 instructor-led training activities, 24 engaging training games and activities, 25 activities. So I'm getting lots of lists from different sites, but I'll have to dive into one to get a particular.
But you're seeing a lot of things coming up to the front.
Oh yeah.
Put that in.
Yes.
See in the chat, Wendy says something she saw was polling. There's quiz games. Gary says there's write and run. I like that term, Gary, write and run. Rock, paper, scissors tournament, Wendy. Awesome. Might be a good way to do it. So when you think about using the engagement, as learners, we really want to be stimulated, right? We don't want to just be that person in the former picture where we're just ready to go. I'm done. Get me out of here. This is boring. And to help with that, you should really think about every 6 to 8 minutes having some kind of activity or some kind of attention getter. Now, your sessions, I think, are going to be, Wendy, correct me if I'm wrong, I think they're about 45 minutes. Is that right?
Yeah, 45 to 50 minutes
50?
with, yeah.
Okay. So, I mean, every 6 to 8 minutes, that sounds like a lot, but we've only been engaged here for less than half an hour. And I've already given you at least 4 or 5 different things that you could use. So think about ways that you can use what I've shared, use what you're seeing in the search that you just did, and incorporate that as part of the learning when you go to give your facilitation for club officer training. This is one, I think it might be similar to what Gary has, where it was like a write and run. This is kind of what we would call maybe like a search and share type of an exercise, but trying to get you to not only listen to me to see what I've got on the slide, but to actually pick up your phone or go online and do something, and then let's talk about it. Another very simple activity that you could do as part of your learning session. Now, for this particular tip, I think you probably noticed that a couple occasions earlier in this session. Silence really is golden. When you wait for that pause and you wait long enough, somebody will eventually start to talk. But you can use silence to your benefit as well. If you've been talking and droning on, or others are just droning on and on and on, they're used to hearing sounds, they're used to hearing words coming out of your mouth. When you stop, that creates a very audible pause, and that can help redirect attention. If someone's kind of starting to zone off and you've stopped talking, it might be like, what did I miss? What's happening? What's going on? You're going to help redirect their focus. Is there anything that strikes you about the silence using that? Have you found that beneficial in any previous sessions for those that had some tips and tricks in your own back pocket? Wendy, I see a thumbs up from you.
I mean, it creates a little discomfort sometimes, but like it's a great way to redirect, especially if you've just got people that are sort of, potentially talking on the side or things like that. If you just stop and wait,
Mhm.
doesn't
really
take long before they stop.
Yeah. And so, and thank you, Christian. That's a great point, right? Yeah, it can be uncomfortable. I'll admit I was uncomfortable waiting at the beginning. Were you hearing me? What are you going to share? What's happening? But if you can learn to be uncomfortable in that silence, it will help to start draw out things from your audience. Now, you don't want to wait forever. I mean, there is a point where you'll need to interject, but try to use that as a technique if you feel that things are waning or if you need to help redirect. Silence is golden. Duct tape itself is silver. Just something there. Now, this is a lot on one slide, and I will make the slides available for all of you after this presentation. But just again, tips. I had you do a Google search. We had 18, we had 24, we had all these different things that came up when you did your Google search. But when we're talking about learning engagement, here are just some other things to keep top of mind. The first one really is that learn by doing, that kinesthetic side of things, but incorporating that with things like getting social, right? Modern learners, adults, we want to be able to share those learning experiences. Going mobile. Now, we're not necessarily doing that here. I mean, yes, I had you use your phone, but when I say going mobile, we're talking about what are some other ways you can help the learner continue that learning journey. Maybe it's listening to a podcast. Maybe it's going and watching a video. Maybe it's doing something on the fly where they're at. Giving them something in their fingertips is a way that you can help to continue that engagement even beyond the session that you're providing. Now, when we talk about mistakes, learners have to be able to learn from those mistakes, and giving them that kind of productive failure, that feedback, is where they'll help to learn. You can use that with some of the social sharing as well, right? Having each other talk about, here's a problem I worked with. Here's how I overcame it. Here's how I overcame that situation. Helping people really learn from those mistakes. Scenarios, we've done things similar in previous TLIs. We used case studies a number of times, and those are helpful, but you want to make sure that it's a relevant and authentic story, that it gives some context to the scenario that you're asking people to do. Problems we've already talked about, and emotions, right? I mentioned that as individuals, as adults, there is an emotional factor. We do want to be encouraged. We do want to have a little bit of that reciprocity from why am I here? What am I getting out of this? So finding ways to make it fun, finding ways to include games, using humor. I know that's going to be a big thing for the TLI happening up north, is using that sense of humor and improv. These are great ways and great tools for things that you can use when it comes to engaging your learners. Now, I've given you a number of things like I mentioned already, but if you look at this list, and maybe there's some not on this list, I saw some in the chat when you were doing your search. What are some of your favorite tricks, engagement activities, tools, or tips? Most of you said that you knew a thing or two, so let's hear it. Let's share for those on the call that maybe didn't not quite know something to use. What are some things that you would like to use when you do your sessions?
Well, I like the very first one, make it personal with storytelling. I always love to make whatever training or whatever session we're having sort of relevant to either my experience or somebody's experience within the group.
Thank you. Yeah, bringing that storytelling really does help bring it in. It helps engage them. It helps capture their attention too, right? Knowing what am I going to hear? Where are we going? What's this journey? That's a good way. What are some others?
Like
Wendy,
case
your hand
studies.
up. Mhm.
Yeah, I like to do case studies when I present because I like it when people work together in groups to solve problems. And I like to see what different groups bring together and so everybody can learn from the other groups as well as their own.
Good. Yeah, case studies are definitely a way to know and to learn from each other and to help with those kinds of things. In the chat, I see Karen mentioned that using or referring to your audience members by name in your examples, that's definitely a good way to go. Case studies, Estelle, a couple thumbs up on those. Humor. Mark, tell me more about humor.
Oh, you just any time you can make someone laugh or tell a funny story to get them to laugh about the situation. I think that's a good way to just pay attention and to listen.
Definitely. So humor is definitely a great way. Not only is it good to help break the ice, but it's a great way to loosen them up, right? To get them laughing. Laughing releases endorphins. It already helps you feel better. It relaxes you. So that's always a great thing to definitely use. So thank you for what you've put in the chat for those of you here. Again, just tips that you're seeing on the screen and learning from each other, right? What has worked well? Is there anything that maybe didn't work so well for any of you that you had tried that didn't quite maybe go as you had planned or thought it might go?
I'm a very analytical person as well sometimes, and I can get deep down into like either data or statistics or stuff like that, and that tends to drag down my presentations, especially when I like to get into the weeds, but others don't.
Right. And I mean, and it's good to be aware of that and to know maybe some of those crutches that we might use to support us when we're facilitating. But again, when we talked about at the beginning, you're here to serve as a facilitator, not as just a presenter. So facilitating is really helping keep it not super deep dived, but keeping it at a general level where everybody can feel engaged or involved with the content that you're going to be using. Now, we talked about the beginning, we talked about learning outcomes. Let's do a little bit of a recap here. I know your time is important and you are very knowledgeable people, but let's do a quick recap. So we talked at the beginning about why. Why do I need to be here? Why do I need to be engaging? Hopefully you went from this to this because you're understanding now when you're engaging with your audience and they are engaging with you, the attention and the focus is there. They're thinking critically. If I'm calling on you, you might not know who's going to be the next person to be called on. They're having to problem solve. You're really making it a learning experience and not just something where you're talking at them. Some of the techniques that I used here are ways that you can use those in your own facilitation to really help bring these things around. Now, I'd mentioned this a few times, but I'm going to ask it again. By the end of this session, what was it that I was really hoping you would take home? Anybody remember?
Well, have one one thing that we can take home and use in the TLI couple weeks.
Thank you, John. Yep, having at least one thing that you can use. Gary, I saw you put in the chat from blah to hurrah. Yes, that's definitely what we're doing. So understanding that one thing and knowing when you might want to use it. We've talked about some different things, and we've definitely talked about what I'm hoping you leave here with is how can you move your learners from to, all right, blah to hurrah. So with everything that we've done and all that you've talked about, and I do appreciate what you've shared and how you've interacted here, I do want to do a quick knowledge check. So let's see how much you were paying attention. And maybe I need to work on my own engagement too. This is a learning experience for me as much as it is for you. So we're going to do a quick knowledge check. Now, I promise these aren't difficult, but let's see how we do. I've got about 4 questions, and I want to see what stands out for you. So let's see how we did. Our first question, and I will have Dick as my Zoom master, make sure that pops up for you. But our first question is, which of the following is a type of learning engagement activity? Is it polls? Is it role playing? Information search and share? Is it fill in the blank? Or is it all of the above? So we'll give it a moment to allow you to make your responses there. And Dick, when we've got the majority or most of our responses in, let us know the results.
And we got 15 out of 16.
All right. I think we can move forward. We'll give it another 10 seconds.
I already did poll, sorry.
So how did we do? How did we do with our first question? The correct answer is all of the above. All of these are different types of learning activities, learning engagement that you can use as part of helping to engage your audience. How did you do? Pretty good? All right, Gary's got the smart glasses on. All right, well, let's move on. Let's see what our next question is. So the next question I'm asking is, which learning engagement activity best helps learners to apply their knowledge? Which learning activity best helps learners apply their knowledge? Is it debate, role playing, case studies? We talked a lot about those. Note taking. Which one of these do you think is the best to help learners apply their knowledge? And again, we'll give it a moment here. Greg, I see you've got role playing in the chat. Thank you.
Yeah, we got 15 of 16 responded.
Okay. Need to count down again. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Let's see our results, Dick. The correct answer. So this is a little tricky, and I'll give you half credit if you said role playing. So Greg, you get a half a point for that one. The correct answer really for best learning is the case study. Case studies really tend to focus on why and how to apply a certain skill or a concept. You know, Wendy kind of talked about it. It was mentioned earlier. You want to use case studies when understanding a concept is more important than just understanding basic responses. Now, role playing, I will give you half credit, right? That is another good possible answer. While it's not necessarily the best, because sometimes people don't feel comfortable acting. They may not want to get up necessarily in front of a group for others to look at them as they're doing a role play. So you just want to keep that in mind if that's something that you wish to use. It doesn't mean you can't use it, but just make sure you're using it appropriately and that you know your audience well enough to know that they're comfortable to engage in that type of activity. All right, we're almost there. Gary, I see you've kind of got a thinking, we'll call it a thinking emoji there in the chat. Our next question is, you engage your learners best when you use a blank learning style. Fill in the blank. Do you engage them best by using visual, combination, auditory, or kinesthetic learning styles? We'll give that a moment to allow people to log their votes. And then Dick, when we are about there.
Yeah, we got 14 out of 16 at the moment.
Okay, I see we've got an answer in the chat. Kinesthetic. Thank you again, Greg.
Okay, I'll close it out.
All right, how did we do? How did you do? The correct answer here, you want to engage your learners best when you use a combination, letter B in this particular one. Using that combination really helps them to not only see it, but to hear it and to touch or to do it. So that's really going to wrap and incorporate all three of those learning styles and help make a more impactful session for you. Now, I told you at the beginning, the learning outcome, what's the one thing that you're going to take and try to use in your session? So this one is not going to pop up on the screen, but I want you to use the chat. Let me know, put in the chat, what is one engagement technique that you plan to use as a result of what we've talked about here today? Or maybe it's one you already knew and we didn't talk about it. Let's see what people have in the chat and let's see what we've got here. Mary, I see you've got sharing personal stories. Wendy said Googling with the cell phone. Okay. Estelle's going to try polls. Stephen is games. Carl is games. Awesome. I want to be part of those. Tell me what you end up doing for the games. Chris says it's going to be virtual, so polling will be a great addition. Awesome. As you see, it's a feature that definitely can be incorporated as part of the Zoom platform. Gary, I love it. Whatever it is, I'm going to do it about every 8 minutes. All right. Karen says personal stories or using the Google it. Perfect. Mark is saying storytelling, Christian, role playing, and a live demo. Live demos are great, especially when you need to do things that have a more technical aspect. That's a great thing to use. John mentioned stories. Excellent. Well, I appreciate your engagement and your participation in this one. Kind of going to wrap things up and let you get on with your evening, but a quote from Benjamin Franklin that to just leave you with here is, he says, "Tell me and I forget. Teach me and I remember. Involve me and I learn." Make sure when you're going through your facilitation in the coming weeks that you're checking in with your participants after each of those topics, after each learning outcome. Do they know what they're trying to do, what you're asking of them? Are they getting it? Do you need to circle back? So I'm going to open up now because we do have a few minutes yet. So what's on the top of your mind? Hopefully you're feeling like you are a little more prepared to be able to move that learner from blah to hurrah. So any questions that come to mind for you or things that maybe we didn't cover? Because I want to hear from you. A lot of you said like, hey, I know a thing or two. What's something that we haven't talked about that we can share with the rest of the team on the call today?
So is there any like actual material I have to cover on the VP? And I believe I'm doing membership role, or just wing it and go based on my experience and background?
So, so repeat that for me. Was there the question or are you making the statement? Just so I understand you.
Is there some material I need to cover, like a PowerPoint or a book or something?
For the education, the vice president education session?
I think I'm doing VPM or VPPR. I think VPM.
Okay, for membership. Wendy, I'm going to let you chime in because I know you've been working on the content development for these. So I believe you will have slides available, but Wendy, if you want to help chime in on that one.
Yeah, absolutely. Marilyn, I'm so sorry if you haven't received it. The education chairs received all of the different presentations for all of the different officer roles. I'll make sure that you get it after the seminar, but they also have them for you to review and to use.
Okay. And then you mentioned slides. Well, I think I'm part of South. Will there be like a ability to show slides, like a computer or a projector
Yes.
or something? There will be.
There would-
Okay.
Yeah, the venue where they have it, each of the rooms where, at least if I remember, and Gary, you can chime in, each room had a monitor and the ability to project to that large wall-mounted monitor.
So I need to bring a computer of my own.
Yeah, this is
Yep.
Christian. If you have a laptop, you should bring a laptop.
I have my
Yeah.
work laptop. I'm hoping it will work. I can't like hook it up to things that might give it a virus.
There shouldn't be anything. All you'd be hooking up to is is something to project, so that wouldn't give it a
Yeah.
virus.
Okay. All
Yeah.
right.
Good question. I know there's a lot of information too, with all of your
when-
sessions, right? There is a
when-
lot of information.
Wendy, this is Bev. What
Bev.
email address will those come from? Because I have not seen them yet, but then it might be there.
You know, I'm not sure which email that Tony used. It would come from Tony Curry because he's the person who I provided those presentations to. But again, I'm happy to send it to you as well after this seminar.
Okay, mine's the treasurer if you're gonna send individual.
I got it. I'll do it. I'm writing it down right now. Thank you for letting me know.
Okay, thank you.
And I also see in the chat, so Chris posted a link and he says this is for what was hosted on TLI Virtual with the presentation templates that Wendy sent out. So if you're able to, I would encourage you to also go either grab that and click on it so you've got it open. But I think you can also save the chat from this particular call if you would like to do that as well. And I appreciate it. Well, I'm hoping today that you've had a chance. We started with the poll right off the bat. How are you feeling? Most of you knew a thing or two. Hopefully now you're a little bit less this and more this, whatever going on. You're feeling better. Maybe you've bumped up at least one little step from where you were before when we started this whole journey together tonight. Now, I would appreciate as well if you would provide feedback. That's one of the things as Toastmasters that we do thrive on, and what really helps us stand apart is knowing what are we doing well. So this is an opportunity where you can get that phone out again and scan that QR code. It'll take you to a Google form, but I will also drop that in the chat maybe as well, so that you have the link also in the chat. Let's see if this will work. If you don't want to use your phone, there you go. You can also just click on that link and just let me know your thoughts. I'm always open. I know there's things I can definitely do better, and we learn best from each other. But I thank you very much for all of your time today. I do have one last slide, which is just some additional resources. There's a couple articles out there on our Toastmasters International site. There's a podcast, and then a couple links with some content that I helped pull from as part of this presentation so that you have those at your fingertips. The survey says I need access. All right, I will have to follow up on that. So if for some reason it's not working for you, I will follow up, Wendy. I will make sure to send a revised link. But I do appreciate all of your time today, and thank you for being in there with me. Hopefully you feel a little bit more like you can help move your learners from blah to hurrah. So I'll hang out for another minute or two if you've got other questions, but if not, I appreciate your time and your involvement and engagement, and I wish you all a great night. So any other questions, if you need them, I'll hang out here for another minute. If not, I would bid you all best of luck at your TLI, and thanks again for being with me this evening.
Thank you,
Thanks, Heather.
Heather.
Good job.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
just
Yay!
hurrah. Heather, I think if you just change the permissions on those files, you don't have to resend the link. You just have to change the permissions in Google.
All right.
So let everybody have access, and then we can just use the same link.
All right. I will make sure to work in doing that one. Thank you, Christian.
Cool. You're welcome.
All
Yeah,
right.
Thank you, Heather.
Thank you very
Oh.
much. I appreciate it.
That was awesome. You got to get that survey out so we can let everybody know how awesome it was.
Thank you, Heather.
Thank you all.
I'll stop recording now. Is that all right, Heather?
That's perfect. Thank you.